Hello, everybody. It's Mrs. Pound, and I am back with the very last section of our chapter on types of machines. And what we're going to talk about today are compound machines. Generally, you do not find that we use simple machines that are just simple machines, where we generally don't use just an inclined plane. I mean, sometimes we do, or just a lever, or pulley, or um, screw, wheel and axle, or what's the last one? A wedge. Okay. So generally, we're not just using one of those single things. Generally, our machines have more than one simple machine. And so that's where the compound machines come in. So our objectives today are going to be to identify simple machines within complex machines and compare the mechanical advantage of a compound machine to the mechanical advantages of the simple machines that make it. So here is an example of a compound machine. We have a combination of two or more simple machines. So what simple machines can you see in this old printing press? What I see is I see a wheel and axle over here. There's a gear, which would be a wheel and axle. There's a pedal down here, which would involve a lever of sorts. And it looks like there's a lever up here as well. So there are a number of different simple machines in this printing press. And there's probably, if I looked even closer, I could find more. So that makes it a compound machine. So, what I want you to do, if you're listening to this, is I want you to look around or think about what you have at home, and I want you to write down or draw one compound machine that you have thought of or see around you in the next to compound machine. Okay, so one common example that we see is scissors. Scissors, we talked about with levers, are a first class lever, but they are also a wedge because they have the blades down here. So they are, in fact, a compound machine, not a simple machine. And we've talked about it as a lever. Another compound machine that we have talked about that we use as an example of a lever is a furniture dolly. It's not only a lever, excuse me, a second class lever, it's also has a wheel and axle, actually two on it. So it is in fact a compound machine. Now, what about calculating the mechanical advantage of a compound machine? To do that, we have to find the product of the mechanical advantages of the simple machines. Now, finding the product means we have to multiply. So here's another thing to make sure you're listening. If you are listening next to this statement, write an X for multiplication. So the mechanical advantage of a hobby horse and a fixed gear bike with the same size tires would be different because now you're probably saying, "Well, what is a hobby horse? I've never heard of that." Well, a hobby horse was basically the precursor to a bicycle, and it was just a bicycle without pedals. So it had two wheels, and you pushed it with your feet. Actually, at my house, we called it a push bike. My all of my children learned how to ride a bicycle first by balancing on what would have been called a hobby horse. And you can see here, okay, two wheel and axles, and possibly for the steering mechanism up here, also a wheel and axle. So two, possibly three simple machines that I see in this hobby horse. And actually, here's another thing. On a bicycle, the seat you sit on is actually called a saddle, and that comes from the fact that this was a lot like they called it a hobby horse because you got on it like a horse. You put your leg over and you sat on it a lot like a horse. So, looking at this bicycle, a fixed gear bicycle, we can identify our simple machines. Can you look and see what they are? I see one wheel and axle, two wheel and axles. Um, Obviously, wheel and axle here for steering, pedals, wheel and axle, gears, right? So more simple machines. And remember, the mechanical advantage is calculated by finding the product of all the simple machines. So if we have more simple machines to multiply together, We're going to have a larger product. So the fixed gear bike has a higher ideal mechanical advantage because it contains at least one more simple machine, pedals, if not more, like we found. So our objectives today were to identify simple machines within complex machines and to compare the mechanical advantage of a compound machine to the mechanical advantages of the simple machines that make it. So don't forget your 5 questions, and we are done with the chapter. So you have everything you need to start studying for the test.